As he read, the wind blew, rustling some leaves nearby. The sound lingered in his mind. The single note of the wind began to echo into a chord. Then two, then three, then four, subtle from the light breaths of flutes. He penned the music in his sketch paper. After spending time in the garden, he went to his room to compose. All that was on his mind were the plots of the Shakespeare play, filled with fairies and weddings. He began depicting the sprites through the light flurries of the high strings after the flute's windful chords. The low strings were then plucked in a pitter-patter-like way, as if a maiden were running through an enchanted forest. Her white dress flowing in her trance, the sprites follow her, encouraging her to run faster. Yet the flutes give indication as she halts to see a young fawn grazing the sweet succulents. She continues on in a hurry, hoping not to be late. Anticipation flourished among the lilies and wildflowers. In her need to catch breath, the flutes indicate her slowing pace once more. When running a bit further, she enters a wedding scene. The grand chords burst forth in excitement upon the bride's arrival. It was her day, taking place in the mystical woods among the sprites and forest creatures. Though the setting was outdoors, the shape of the music moved down in a grand trance, as if one of royalty was stepping down a beautiful marble staircase. The orchestra sound moved back up in boldness, then refrained back down. It was as the orchestra moved higher and higher into a cloud of sound. Underneath this cloud, the crisp sound of a certain brass instrument moved down, distinguishing itself from the other instruments. Felix jotted the notes. The ophicleide. It was a low brass instrument. The feeling of the instrument gave the reminiscences of the brass in Weber's exciting music. On the side, he decided to make a rough outline to get a full picture of the piece. He wanted to know where the music would be going to tell the story with the sound itself. The outline came out to be suitable for sonata form, which was a standard form used in a lot of music. It helped organize which keys to transition to and what to repeat. The emphasis on repeating the main motifs would help the listener familiarize the work and remember it. Zelter, of course, encouraged that form, as it was deemed one of the most practical. As he continued the days with the piece and read the play for more insight, he decided to consult a friend. His name was Marx. He was a musicologist working as a music critic. Felix had become acquainted with him, as he had much intrigue on Marx's way of characterizing music through words. Upon showing Marx the overture in progress, Marx gave much suggestion on the poetic tone aspects of the work, the art of mimicking things with the instruments. Felix had already done some of that already, but Marx furthered it with in-depth advice. One idea came with the strings. Felix grabbed a separate sheet of paper and sketched some tonal shapes moving from high to low in dramatic exaggeration. It was the hee-haws of a burrow in which the play famously contained. By the time the month of August came that year, he finished the overture to A Midsummer Night's Dream. Upon completing it, he arranged it for a piano duet. Once it was played through by him and Fanny, she approved of the work. A few weeks after finishing the composition, Felix's studies moved to the University of Berlin. There, his lectures and instructors expanded. He excelled in his studies. His status as an assistant at the Sing Academy allowed him to conduct some concerts and organize a few things. He hoped in his future to take over after Zelter retired, but Abraham hoped his son's interest would lie elsewhere. In November, Felix's dear friend Ignaz Moscheles was touring through Berlin again. He was invited over to the Mendelssohn home, as by now he was well acquainted. When he came, Felix and Fanny both went to the piano and played the arrangement of Felix's new overture. Ignaz was astounded and wished to hear an orchestra play the score. Felix planned to publish the score. Ignaz played some of his own compositions as well. He gave Felix the music, a series of studies he wrote. Upon Ignaz's leave of Berlin, Felix then began to write to him to stay in touch with his friend. He grabbed an E major sonata to enclose. He then penned, November 28, 1826. You kindly expressed a wish, dear Mr. Moscheles, to have my sonata, and I therefore shall present it to you. Should you come across it, let it remind you of the one who will always respect you. Once more, 1,000 heartfelt thanks for the happy hours I owe to your studies. They will long find an echo in my mind. I am sure they are the most valuable of your works, that is, until you write another. My best wishes accompany you on what I trust will be a happy and pleasant journey. Please remember me kindly to Mrs. Mocheles, and believe me, ever yours, Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdi. In February of 1827, when Felix turned 18, he was packing up a horse-drawn sled that would be taking him to the city of Stettin for a concert. He had received a letter from the composer and conductor Carl Loewe, requesting to have the Overture to A Midsummer Night's Dream premiered. Loewe came across the work through Marx. They had been fellow students of composition together. When Loewe began planning for a concert, Marx eagerly told him of Felix's new overture and had a copy sent. Loewe agreed to have it performed. He also wanted Felix to play with the orchestra in some other selected works. The journey would be long and cold, since the month of February still had phases of snow. Stettin was 80 miles away. His father seemed hesitant about it, but helped him pack. He spoke to Felix beforehand on how to deal with travel and weather. It would take a full day and a half to get there, and traveling in any sort of drastic weather had its risks. The morning when the sleigh was packed, the calm sun and gray sky indicated only a chill. The sled would hopefully ride smooth against the snowy terrain. Regular carriage weren't as common during the winter season. Felix wore his warmest wool coat, lined with leather. He had proper footwear, wool scarf, winter cap, and other necessary garments to protect himself from exposure. Abraham was sure to hire an experienced coachman in case anything were to happen. Leah made sure enough food was packed by gathering a basket full of essentials. It consisted mostly of dried meats and fruit. Once everything was ready, Felix grabbed the remaining things, such as his music and violin. He then climbed into the sled and waved to his family. Auf Wiedersehen. As his parents and siblings waved back, the journey carried on. The sled glided against the finely packed snow along the city streets. The city soon became a sparse landscape of a few houses and farmland. Then it turned into a snowy wilderness with scattered forest. The heavy snowbanks began to force the two horses to trudge, slowing the ride every now and again. A few hours into the trip, the coachman began to visit with Felix. Many times Felix sat next to him at the driver's seat. "So how long has this been your line of work?" asked Felix. "Oh, about 15 years. I enjoy going places and having good conversations. You wouldn't believe some of the passengers I've had to listen to." The middle-aged man chuckled. "What is your name?" "Jonathan." His voice resonated with Jubal. "Now what is bringing you all alone to Stettin?" "A concert." Felix grabbed a manuscript from his satchel. "The orchestra there is premiering my work." "I don't believe it. One as young as you," he stated. "I'm also going to be playing piano and violin in the orchestra. You should watch. They are doing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony." "I may. Then I'll believe you," he half teased. Felix then commented, "I am 18, an adult, so I'm not as young as you think." "Well, you are a young adult." His smile soon began to fade as he looked to the sky. He turned to Felix. "Go back in the sled and get as much sleep as you can." His tone seemed worrisome. Felix tilted his head. "It's late morning. I'm not tired." "You must. I sense a storm coming. You want to save as much energy as you can. When it starts, put that wool blanket over you." Jonathan grabbed a blanket for himself. Felix listened and grabbed a blanket. He then laid in the back seat of the sled, the best he could. There wasn't any good position to have a comfortable sleep, but he managed to nap. After an hour or so, he felt the snowflakes land on his face. Felix sat up from his rest. Some flurries were blowing about, but nothing to dread over. Within another hour, the snow fell consistently, adding beauty to the landscape. Felix opened his mouth, catching the cold crystals. Jonathan glanced back to check on him. "I would get under the blanket. The snow is going to pick up from now, as well as the cold." Felix obeyed him, but before retiring to nap again, he grabbed a book and some dried fruit to eat. It was still light enough even under the blanket to read. As another hour dragged by, the sled suddenly thudded into harsh terrain. The deep, thick snow almost stopped the sled. Felix peeked out from under the blanket. His heart skipped in shock. The snow was coming down hard. It confused his sense of direction. Jonathan seemed to somehow know where they were. He had most of his face covered by his long hat. A strong winter wind blew. Felix gasped as the cold air hit against his face. He felt as if he were breathing in sharp fractals of ice. Jonathan noticed him and ordered through the howling wind, "Stay under the blanket." Felix huddled back under it. The air had winded him. He did his best to warm back up, The hardwood floor of the sled hit against the cold snow, which made it more of a challenge. After a while, though, he finally felt warmer. Every ounce of energy had left him. The snow collected against the blanket, weighing it down on him, which helped conserve heat. The weighted blanket and his tired state caused him to drift into heavy sleep. Felix awoke to calmer weather. He sat up, but night had fallen. There wasn't much to see. The air had become drastically cooler. He wrapped a scarf over his face. Jonathan suggested he sleep more, but he felt too bored out of his mind to do so. Jonathan had a lamp for light, so Felix lit one as well, which helped keep him warm a little. He then grabbed a quill and paper to write back to his family of his experience thus far. As he began to write, the ink began to freeze soon after he opened the inkwell. Then the quill snapped as it had become brittle with frost. He wouldn't be writing. The rest of the night dragged on, with the constant need to keep warm.